I've always preferred going solo. It's not that I don't like people, I just don't like distractions. When I explore these kinds of places, I need to feel like I'm inside it, like I'm part of whatever's left behind. Other people just mess with that. They talk too loud or act like it's a joke. It's not. This place, Sunset Vista Lodge, was way out in the Nevada desert, middle of nowhere. The kind of place where your phone loses signal before the road even runs out. I found it on one of those obscure forums for urban explorers. A few blurry photos, some half-dead Reddit thread about someone going there years ago and seeing weird stuff. That's all I needed. I waited until after midnight to head out. Not just because of the heat, though yeah, daytime desert heat'll melt your boots to the road. But there's something about night that feels right. Darkness makes everything more honest. You don't get to gloss over the grime when the only light you've got is a flashlight beam. It forces you to see what's really there. Sunset Vista wasn't hard to get to. No fences, no keep out signs. Not even a chain across the driveway. Just an old neon sign collapsed in the dirt, and this long, low building slouched like it had stopped trying years ago. You could tell from the outside, it had been empty for a long time. Paint curling like dead skin. Windows busted out and left to rot in their frames. I stood there for a while just staring at it. There was no wind, no sound. That kind of silence only happens in the desert. Felt like the place was waiting. Not for me specifically, just something. I went in anyway. Places like this, they rot in layers. You start to notice it when you've explored enough abandoned buildings. There's a difference between a place that's newly empty and one that's been hollowed out for years. Sunset Vista Lodge wasn't just abandoned. It had settled into it, like the desert had claimed it. Let it cook in the heat until it gave up. The pool was the first thing I noticed. Empty, cracked, full of trash and old beer cans. It looked like someone had tried to tag the deep end and fallen in halfway through. Plastic lawn chairs melted into warped skeletons along the edge. That smell, dust, rust, something maybe once organic, just hung in the air. Not strong, just there. I walked the perimeter for a bit, shining my flashlight up at the second-story walkway. The thing looked like it could give out if a pigeon landed on it wrong. Metal railings bent out of shape, the concrete chipped like old teeth. I didn't even trust it enough to lean on later. I'd rather risk the dark than fall through rotten cement. Every door I passed was either missing or barely hanging on. Some cracked open like they expected company. I told myself it was all typical. Graffiti everywhere, some pretty good, some just nonsense. A few dirty mattresses in the rooms, stripped of anything that made them look like they ever belonged to a functioning business. A busted TV here, a toppled dresser there, all of it softened by layers of dust and years of being ignored. Still, something felt off, like the building had absorbed too much silence, too much heat. It didn't feel abandoned in the no one's here kind of way. It felt like whatever had been here had sunk into the walls, and I had just walked in. I was halfway down what I figured was the West Wing, probably where the cheaper rooms were, judging by how torn up everything looked, when I heard it. A voice. Faint. Female, I think, but way too far off to catch any words. It wasn't a scream or anything sharp, more like someone talking low, maybe to themselves. That somehow made it worse. I didn't hesitate, killed my flashlight immediately, and slipped into the nearest open room. Not because I was panicking, more out of instinct. I've done this long enough to know when to shut up and get small. Sometimes you run into other explorers. Sometimes it's junkies or squatters or just someone messing around. People can be unpredictable when they think they're alone. The room I ducked into had barely anything left in it. The kind of emptiness that doesn't even feel lived in anymore. A mattress stained with something that looked like motor oil, broken drawer handles on the floor, and a half-melted soap bar still stuck to the tile in the bathroom. I crouched by the wall and waited. I figured I'd hear something. Footsteps, maybe a flashlight beam sweeping across the hallway. Some sign that someone was moving through. But there was nothing. No voices, no echo of doors creaking open. Just the kind of silence that makes your ears strain, like they're trying to create sound just to fill the space. And the longer it went on, the weirder it felt. Like that voice didn't belong to anyone who was still walking around. That didn't make sense, of course. I told myself it was just someone talking outside and moving on. Or maybe I imagined it. Sound does strange things out in the desert, but something about it didn't sit right. It didn't fit. I don't even remember why I chose that room. It didn't stand out from the others. Door cracked the same way, same broken handle, same faded number plate barely hanging on. Just one more stop on the walk-through. But something pulled me in. Maybe it was the way the shadows hit the floor, or maybe it was nothing at all. The inside didn't hit me all at once. It took a second. At first, it just looked like the usual dust, broken furniture, a mattress that had probably been rained on through a busted ceiling at some point. But then I really looked at the walls. They were covered, not in graffiti, not in symbols or pictures, just writing. Tiny, dense, overlapping in places like someone came back later and kept going. Words written in pen, Sharpie, scratched in with keys or nails, or maybe something worse. Every surface they could reach had something on it. Even the mirror. Especially the mirror. The thing is, most of it didn't even make sense. Just strings of phrases, over and over again. Stuff like they blink too loud and she's under the floor. One part of the wall had the same question repeated 10, maybe 20 times. What was the noise for? And none of it was crossed out. It wasn't tagging. It wasn't meant to be seen. It felt like someone trying to explain something they couldn't understand themselves. I don't know why I stayed in there as long as I did. I should have backed out the second I realized what I was looking at. But I kept reading. I kept trying to read. It was like my brain thought if I stared long enough it would all connect somehow. It didn't. It just made me feel wrong, confused, maybe even watched. The second I stepped out of that room, the one with the writing, I heard it. It came from somewhere above me. A slow, deliberate banging, not fast, not panicked, just steady, thump, then a pause, then thump again. It didn't sound like footsteps or someone moving stuff around. It was heavier than that, like something or someone was throwing their weight against a wall in a way that didn't feel casual, repetitive, focused. I froze right there in the hallway, hand still near my pocket flashlight, not even raising it yet. Just listening, trying to line up what I was hearing with something that made sense. I told myself it could be an animal, maybe a raccoon or a coyote that found a way in and got trapped upstairs. That happens sometimes. Things get into places they can't get out of, but part of me knew even then that this didn't sound like that. Animals are frantic. This wasn't. It felt intentional. And yeah, I should have just turned around, gone back out the way I came, called it a night. I mean, I'd already seen enough weird for one trip, but I didn't. I lingered there like an idiot, waiting for the next sound, like I needed to hear it again to be sure it was real. Part of me wanted it to just stop, prove it was nothing. Another part of me needed to confirm it was something explainable. The worst part was how familiar the rhythm felt. It wasn't just noise. It was like a pattern, almost like something someone might do to cope. Not that I had the guts to go check it out yet, but I was already trying to convince myself it would make sense once I saw it. Except deep down, I wasn't sure I wanted to see. I don't know what came over me, but I went up. The staircase barely deserved the name, chunks missing, metal twisted, railing gone like it had been ripped off years ago. One bad step, and I'd have eaten concrete. But still, I climbed. Maybe part of me felt like I had to finish it, like if I didn't go up, the sound would follow me home in my head. By the time I reached the top, the banging had stopped, completely. Not even an echo left behind. That somehow made it worse. I told myself again that I'd find someone, another explorer maybe, a local kid messing around. Hell, even just an empty room with a pipe rolling across the floor would have been fine. But when I peeked through the door frame of the room it came from, I knew this wasn't going to be fine. There was something standing near the back wall. I couldn't see her clearly at first, just the silhouette. The room was dark, and I kept my flashlight aimed low, not wanting to blind anyone. Or maybe not wanting to see too much too fast. When I finally raised the light, slow, careful, like that would somehow make it better, I saw her. A woman, or something that used to be one. Her skin was pale in that dead, unnatural way. Her forehead was raw, like she'd been slamming it into the wall over and over, and her mouth, God, there was this thick yellow crust smeared all around it, open wide, like a scream that got stuck somewhere inside. She didn't move at first, but I didn't wait around for her to change her mind. I turned and bolted, barely remembering how to breathe. I've never run that fast in my life. I couldn't even tell you how I made it back to the car. It's like my brain blacked out the trip down the stairs and across the lot. 1 second I was staring into that room, and the next the lights from the highway were glowing through the windshield. I don't remember looking back once. I don't even think I let go of my keys the whole time I was running. Once I slammed the door shut, I just sat there, breathing hard, trying to make my hands stop shaking. I called Daryl, not because I thought he'd have answers, but because I needed to say it out loud, to someone who knew how these places could mess with your head. I told him everything, and he said what I was already thinking, even though I didn't want to say it first, that the banging had probably been her. The woman, slamming her head into the wall. I kept asking myself if I should call the cops. But how do you explain that? Hey, I was trespassing in an abandoned motel and saw something messed up. You should go check it out. I didn't want trouble, just someone else to know. I found the non-emergency number and called from a gas station a few blocks away. Told them I overheard something about a woman inside the lodge. I was vague on purpose, like I'd heard it secondhand. Hung up before they asked too much. I still don't know what I saw in there. Maybe it was drugs. Maybe she was just gone in the head. But it wasn't just what she looked like, it was how she was. Like she'd been there for a long time, sinking into whatever broke her. I've seen weird before, but not like that, not even close. I never planned on breaking into an abandoned asylum. Honestly, it started as a dumb joke. My hometown had become a pressure cooker of petty fights, family feuds, and non-stop gossip. I was itching for something real, something that would yank me out of my comfort zone. When my cousin Marissa casually mentioned Hawthorne Asylum, 2 hours away, shuttered since the 90s, rumored to be crawling with urban explorers and vandals, I felt that spark. It was exactly what I needed, a challenge to prove I wasn't just talk. For days I obsessed over old photos online, broken windows framing dusty corridors, rusted gurneys abandoned in what looked like the old ward rooms. Each click fueled me. Imagine the stories those walls could tell, but every time excitement bubbled up, my brain threw a wet blanket on it. It's off limits. It's falling apart. What if a floorboard snaps beneath you? Cops could be patrolling. Still, each what if felt less like genuine caution and more like a dare. The louder my doubts got, the more I wanted to prove I wasn't chicken. So I started reframing those excuses. The no trespassing signs weren't warnings, they were a red carpet invitation. The falling plaster and corroded pipes? Just set dressing for the ultimate adrenaline trip. I convinced myself I'd be careful, stick close to the group, flashlights fully charged, phones on silent in case we spooked someone, and if someone did show up, well, that would just crank the story up to 11. By the time I loaded my backpack with snacks, extra batteries, and a first aid kit, I was all in. My heart hammered as I slid into the driver's seat, the engine rumbling to life. The headlights cut through the cold pre-dawn mist on the highway, and I remember thinking, this is it. Either I prove I'm not a coward, or I find out exactly how far courage can carry me. The sun hadn't broken the horizon yet when I turned off the paved road onto the crack-ridden service path leading to Hawthorne Asylum. My headlights carved narrow tunnels through towering weeds that pressed in on both sides, leaves brushing against the car with soft scratching sounds. My heart thundered so loud I thought it might shatter my ribs. I gripped the steering wheel as if it were the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. I parked just before the road narrowed too much, cut the engine, and listened to the sudden hush. The only noises were the distant call of a lone bird and the fading hum of my taillights. The air was thick, damp, carrying the smell of wet grass and rusted metal. I sat there, willing the engines ticking to drown out the chaotic thoughts swirling in my head. Why am I here? The question repeated itself, louder each time I blinked. I glanced at the clock on the dash, 5:13. No authorities would be out patrolling this early. Yet that offered little comfort. What exactly was I chasing? A rush of adrenaline? Proof that I wasn't just another armchair explorer. The weeds shivered in the beam, forming ghostly shapes that my mind kept turning into lurking figures. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, head back to the familiar roads, back to normal. But I'd talked myself into this. I'd convinced myself it would be epic, that the photos and stories weren't half as intense as the real thing. And here, in the pre-dawn silence, I felt the weight of that promise. The uncertainty pressed down, a mix of exhilaration and dread. I forced my shoulders down, released a shaky breath, and grabbed my flashlight. As I swung the car door open, the cold air hit me like a slap, and I knew there was no turning back now. Stepping through the front doors of Hawthorne Asylum felt like plunging into another world. The foyer was vast, its peeling vinyl tiles littered with shards of glass and chunks of plaster from the ceiling. My flashlight beam danced across walls that looked more like diaries of despair than mere architecture. Deep, ragged gouges cut through layers of faded paint, names, symbols I couldn't decipher, jagged lines that reminded me of someone's frantic strokes. I kept waiting for my rational brain to kick in. Maybe these markings were decades old, relics of bored trespassers or fading graffiti artists. But then I'd catch a glimpse of fresher lines, edges that seemed sharper, like they hadn't been smoothed by time and dust. My pulse spiked every time I edged closer, leaning in to examine a symbol that almost looked like a crude lock, or another that resembled a misshapen face. The haggard scribbles felt alive, like someone had just walked away, leaving their story raw on the walls. Each time I flicked my light away, I saw the shadows gather behind me, and the silence stretched until I thought I'd drown in it. I tried to steady my breathing, telling myself I was just overreacting to decayed plaster and paint. But my stomach churned. What if these weren't random tags? What if they were warnings? The idea that someone had been here not long ago, carving those symbols to send a message, pressed on me like a physical weight. I stepped back, my flashlight trembling in my grip. The foyer suddenly felt too open, too exposed, like it was watching me just as much as I was watching it. That moment, standing in the center of those broken tiles, I realized I wasn't just wandering through abandoned hallways. I was trespassing in someone else's story, and I had no idea how it ended. I edged down the hallway, flashlight sweeping over peeling wallpaper, until I rounded a corner into an old wardroom. That's when I saw it. A duffel bag, half unzipped, abandoned on a warped linoleum floor. My pulse kicked up as my beam landed on the strap's tiny built-in light, still flickering dimly, as if whoever had been here just seconds ago had left in a hurry. Next to the bag, snack wrappers crumpled like empty shells, a half-drunk water bottle rolling slightly under my foot. I froze, mind racing. The place was supposed to be deserted, decayed, and abandoned for decades. Yet here was clear evidence someone else was sneaking around these halls. My heart pounded in my ears like a war drum. Who? My thoughts skittered. Another urban explorer, camera-toting thrill-seeker. A vandal, or something more sinister, skulking in the shadows. I knelt, careful not to disturb anything, and aimed my light into the bag's open mouth. A tangled charger cable, a modern paperback book, something wrapped in a ragged cloth, too new to belong to this crumbling asylum. My throat tightened. The silence pressed in, magnifying every creak of the old building, every whisper of wind through broken windows. I scanned the room's far corner, half expecting movement. Nothing. Just a row of vacant beds with rusted frames, mattresses sagging like tired lungs. Still, my skin crawled with the feeling of unseen eyes tracking my every breath. The unknown presence turned the thrill ride into a trap. Instead of feeling bold and daring, I felt watched, exposed. Every instinct screamed to bolt, to sprint back to the car and flee. But I reminded myself, I came here looking for a story to tell. If someone else had beaten me to it, I would never forgive myself for running away now. So, flashlight in one hand and a clenched jaw, I took a step deeper into the room, whispering to myself, "Show yourself, then. Let's see who's brave enough to meet me face to face." I crept up the cracked tile stairwell to the second floor, each step groaning under my weight. My flashlight carved a tunnel of light through peeling mortar and rusted rails. Faded morning shafts filtered through shattered windows at the far end, but I felt the darkness closing in around me. I rounded a corner and spotted an old prep room. The door hung ajar, just enough for me to slip inside. I nudged it with my foot and stepped through. The second my back cleared the frame, a sudden slam echoed behind me. My blood ran cold. The door swung shut on its own and latched with a metallic click that rattled the hallway walls. I spun around, heart hammering against my ribs. My flashlight beam landed on the tarnished lock plate. No handle on the outside, just a simple latch that wouldn't budge from here. I pressed my palm flat against the wood, testing for weaknesses, but it felt impenetrable. Panic set in. I pounded with both fists, each thud resonating through the narrow corridor. The building felt alive, corralling me deeper into its decaying guts. A cold draft whispered beneath the frame, taunting me. I yanked at the latch, breath coming in staccato bursts, but it refused to give. Questions spun in my head. Was someone on the other side messing with me? Or was the asylum itself playing mind games? Every carved symbol I'd seen earlier flashed through my thoughts. Had they been warnings? My flashlight's narrow beam sliced down the hallway, revealing nothing but barren walls and rotting floorboards. Trapped in that silent chokehold of warped wood and peeling paint, I realized the real danger wasn't just wandering through Hawthorne Asylum. It was being caught inside, alone, with no clear way out. The oppressive quiet pressed on me like water, and I couldn't shake the gutting fear that I'd become part of the building's hidden story, one that refused to let me leave. My flashlight trembled as I climbed down the shattered concrete stairs, each groan and crack underfoot echoing in the cavernous darkness. I could feel the weight of the building pressing around me like I was wading into its deepest secret. By the time I hit the bottom, my lungs were burning, but adrenaline pinned me in place. That's when I saw it. A hunched shape in the far corner, half hidden behind debris. My light settled on a ragged coat sleeve draped over a narrow frame, posture so still it looked carved from stone. For a heartbeat, I thought it was a mannequin left by some twisted artist until I noticed the slow rise and fall breath. It was breathing. I swallowed, mind scrambling to process what I was seeing. This place is supposed to be empty, and yet here was someone, or something, breathing in the darkness. My pulse skipped a beat, then steadied in an eerie calm, like my body had checked out and left my brain behind to panic. I lifted my light higher, shining it across the room, but the beam didn't reach far enough to banish the shadows. Broken beds, rusted tools, and stained mattresses loomed like silent witnesses. The hunched figure didn't move. I dared to take a step forward, heart thudding so loudly I could swear it was echoing off the walls. Then, without warning, came a single, deliberate step right behind me. My stomach plummeted. The sound was clear, sole against crumbling concrete, slow and steady. I froze, gripping the flashlight until my knuckles turned white. A horrifying logic clicked. Whoever or whatever was here wasn't trapped like I was. It was waiting, and in that moment I realized the real terror of Hawthorne Asylum. It wasn't the decay or the legends, but the knowledge that something else still called this place home. Something that moved through the dark as easily as I moved through my own thoughts, only I wasn't sure which was more dangerous. I don't remember exactly when I realized I wasn't safe until I was sprinting for the parking lot. One moment I was stumbling over cracked asphalt, flashlight beam bouncing off tangled weeds. The next, something in the bushes mere feet away sent debris skittering across the ground. A rock slammed into my friend's shoulder, sharp, sudden, freezing us both in place. Before we even registered the pain, I yanked open the car door, shoved my friend inside, and slammed it shut. The lock clicked like a starting gun. My hand trembled so badly I nearly missed the key in the ignition. When the engine thundered to life, it felt like a lifeline. I hammered the gas pedal. Tires spitting gravel, and the car lunged forward as if desperate to break free. The headlights cut narrow white tunnels through the pre-dawn mist, revealing the asylum's silhouette fading behind us. Its broken windows and crumbling walls receded, yet I felt those ragged edges pressing at the back of my mind. My thoughts spun. Who was in those bushes? Had they been watching us the whole time? What if they followed us onto the road? Every nerve buzzed with adrenaline. My knuckles whitened around the wheel. My chest tightened. As the asphalt smoothed and highway lights appeared, hope flickered. but it didn't burn away the dread. I could still almost hear rocks clattering against metal and feel the brush of leaves against my jacket as we tore away. Now, days later, I catch myself gripping the wheel on my commute home, eyes darting to the rearview mirror as if expecting movement in the back seat. Sometimes I swear I feel the weight of unseen eyes pressing down on me, an echo of that chase clinging to my spine. I wonder if Hawthorne Asylum ever really let me go, or if it slipped in my passenger door, hitching a ride on my fear that refuses to leave. Drew's always been into abandoned places, like really into them. He follows all those urban exploration channels and keeps a running list of places he wants to check out. Half of them don't even show up on maps. Most of the time I just let him go do his thing, but for some reason that day I said yes. I don't know why. Maybe I was bored, maybe I just didn't want him going alone, or maybe something in me wanted to be spooked a little. He said this place was different, a huge house, deep in hollow pines, way off the main roads, not the kind of spot you just stumble across. More like the kind you hear about through some friend of a friend rumor that's been passed around too many times to know if any of it's true. But it sounded interesting, so we went. The road out there was barely even a road anymore. Just crumbling concrete veins running through overgrown weeds, trees crowding in close. We had to park under some heavy pines just to keep the car hidden. It wasn't even visible from the road once we got out. I remember that weird moment where we looked back, and the car was just gone, swallowed by the woods. And the quiet, that's what really stuck with me. It wasn't peaceful, it wasn't like being out in nature. It felt wrong, heavy, like everything around us was holding its breath. No birds, no wind, not even the usual hum of bugs. Just this eerie, absolute silence that made the skin on my arms prickle. I didn't say anything at the time, neither did Drew, but something about it felt off before we even saw the place. It was like the woods didn't want us there. I don't even know when I first noticed her. One second, it was just me and Drew walking that overgrown path, and then she was there behind us. Not close, but close enough to notice. And the weird thing is, I don't remember hearing footsteps or anything. Just suddenly felt like we weren't alone. And when I turned around, there she was. She walked like she had nowhere to be, like there wasn't a single thing in the world worth rushing for. Hands folded behind her back, steady pace, eyes forward. It wasn't threatening, not in the usual way, but something about that calmness messed with me. It made me uneasy in a way I couldn't really explain. Like she knew exactly what she was doing, and we were the ones out of place. Drew noticed her too. He didn't say anything right away, just gave me a look like, "You see this too, right?" I nodded without saying a word. We kept walking, pretending it was normal, but I couldn't help glancing back every few seconds. She was getting closer. Not fast, just steady, like she knew we wouldn't run. What really messed with me was her face. That smile, it wasn't friendly. It wasn't even forced. It was knowing, like she was in on something. Like we'd already stepped into something we couldn't step out of, and she was just waiting for us to realize it. I kept telling myself she was probably just some local out for a walk, that it was nothing. But deep down, I knew better. People don't just appear out of nowhere like that. Not in a place like this. Not in hollow pines. And definitely not with that kind of smile. I don't even know how long she followed us. Maybe a minute. Maybe more. I kept glancing back. Just quick looks over my shoulder, trying not to make it obvious. Each time she was a little closer, not threatening exactly, but always there. That steady, silent walk with her hands behind her back, like she had all day to get wherever she was going. Then I looked again. Gone. Just gone. Not on the path. Not in the trees lining the sides. Nothing, like she'd never been there in the first place. The weirdest part? No sound. No crunch of leaves. No branches moving. No footsteps veering off. Just that same heavy silence swallowing everything. It didn't make sense. There's nowhere to disappear to out there. Not without making some kind of noise. But it was like the forest just absorbed her. I remember stopping for half a second, turning around slow, trying to catch even the hint of movement through the brush. Nothing. I looked at Drew and he looked at me, and that was enough. Neither of us said anything. We didn't have to. We just started walking faster. Not running because running would have made it real. We weren't ready to admit how weird it already was. The whole thing sat in my chest like a weight. It wasn't just that she vanished, it was how clean it was. No trace, no sound, no warning. 1 minute she was there. The next minute the path behind us was completely empty, and that smile was still stuck in my head. From the outside, the house looked like it should have been condemned 20 years ago. The kind of place you expect to find wild animals squatting in, or the roof caved in. Ivy had climbed halfway up the walls, and parts of the siding were barely hanging on. Windows shattered, front steps warped and crumbling. Honestly, it looked like a strong wind would take it down, but inside, it didn't match. The moment we climbed through one of the broken windows, it felt like stepping into a frozen moment. The furniture was all still there, dust-covered and worn down, sure, but untouched, arranged like someone had just stepped out for a second. The living room still had framed photos on the walls. Little knickknacks lined the shelves. There were magazines fanned out on a coffee table like someone had been halfway through flipping through them. Even the curtains were still up. In the kitchen we opened the fridge for some reason. Maybe curiosity, maybe habit. I don't know, but we instantly regretted it. The stench hit like a wall, that thick, sour rot that clings to your throat. Mold, decay. But it wasn't just food gone bad. It was that other smell, the one you don't want to name. Like something had died in there and been left too long. I slammed it shut, but the smell hung in the air. It didn't feel like an abandoned house. Not really. I couldn't shake the thought that someone had been here. Maybe not recently, but not that long ago either. Or worse, maybe they'd never really left at all. That weird middle ground where time felt stuck, like the house hadn't been forgotten, just paused, and we were walking straight into it. It was upstairs, in one of the bedrooms that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Dust covered everything in that soft, undisturbed layer, like no one had even breathed in there for decades. Drew was in the hallway checking out something else, and I started opening drawers half out of curiosity, half just looking for anything weird. And that's when I found them. A stack of Polaroids. No album, no frame, just sitting there loose in the top drawer of an old wooden dresser, like someone had left them out on purpose, like they were meant to be found. At first, they didn't look like much. People laughing, sitting on porch steps, blurry backyard cookouts, just regular life. But even then, something about them didn't feel right. The people looked happy enough, but the smiles didn't quite reach their eyes. Some of them were off-center, too close, like whoever took them didn't really care about composition, or didn't know the people that well. Then I hit the one that stopped me cold. It was her, that same woman from the road. No question, same hair, same face, same strange, calm expression. She was sitting on the steps of a basement. This basement, I'm sure of it now. Just sitting there with her hands behind her back and this weird, direct look in her eyes. Not scared, not posing, just looking, like she knew the photo would be found eventually, like this was all part of it. I stared at that picture way too long, tried to come up with a reason. Maybe she was someone who used to live here. Maybe she just looked similar. But no, it was her, and she was already waiting down there. We'd seen every room except the far end of the top floor. It wasn't like we wanted to keep going, but turning back felt worse. The whole place had this pressure to it. Like the longer we stayed, the heavier everything got. That last hallway, narrow and dim with peeling wallpaper and warped floorboards, just seemed like the next step. The final one. Drew was a few steps ahead of me, walking slow. I remember watching him freeze. He didn't say anything, didn't call me over, just stopped mid-step like something locked his whole body up. I moved up next to him, and then I saw why. She was there, not coming toward us, not hiding, just standing. At the far end of the hall in the open doorway of what must have been another bedroom. The same clothes, that same exact smile, like she'd been expecting us this whole time, like none of this was a surprise to her. Her hands were still behind her back, always behind her back. There was no sound, no movement from her, just that stare, That look that felt too direct, too specific. Like she wasn't just looking at us, but through us. Measuring something. Waiting for something. I couldn't move. I didn't want to be anywhere near her, but I also couldn't make myself look away. And yeah, the question was there. What was behind her back? Why was she always hiding it? Why did it feel like the entire day had been leading up to this exact moment? I still don't know what would have happened if we'd stayed there 1 second longer. Maybe she would have spoken again. Maybe she wouldn't have had to. But we left before we could find out. I've never stopped thinking about that. I know we ran, that much is clear. I can still feel that first jolt of movement, like survival just kicked in before my brain even had time to process what was happening. But after that, it's mostly a blur. I don't remember the specifics, just flashes. Trees whipping by, the sound of my shoes slamming concrete, my legs screaming at me to stop, my lungs burning from the cold air. I do remember looking back though. Couldn't help it. I needed to see if she was following us. Needed to know if she was there in one of the upstairs windows just watching. I half expected that smile again, framed behind cracked glass. But there was nothing. No movement, no sign of her at all. Like she'd just stayed. Like she didn't need to chase us. We didn't stop running until the house was completely out of sight. Maybe even farther than that. The fear didn't go away when we hit the road again. When we saw the car, when we finally collapsed into our seats. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I felt sick, nauseous and dizzy and wired all at once. Drew was quiet for a while, just gripping the wheel like it was the only thing holding him together. On the drive back, we tried to come up with explanations. Told each other maybe she was just someone who lived out there. Maybe it was an old caretaker, or someone off their meds, or just playing some sick joke. But none of it fit. None of it made sense with the house, the photos, the silence, that smile. And none of it answered the only thing that still really matters. What was she hiding behind her back? I still wonder. I wish I didn't.